So Autumn, and she's been here to give us a perspective from the Paiute tribe. So thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit more stern than Georgie throughout my presentation. I keep it real. So my Gustaguben, Antigichut, Nunu Mipian, Delphina Edmolikite, Nanchuch, Nunu Mikagu, Nola Zuniga, Nurat, Sudutsing. And my great grandfather was Nober Zuniga from the Cedar Band of Paiutes. His mother's name was Clara Hunkup. She was also from the Cedar Band of Paiutes. So I said, hello friends, good morning. My name is Autumn. My mother's name was Bluebird. Her English name was Delphina. The word that I used after her name, Ikai, means that my mother has passed on. So commonly when you are interacting with us Nuang people, that's what we refer to ourselves as. It means the people. Paiute was a name that was imposed upon us during the Spanish introduction, 1776 with Dominguez Escalante. But when you're talking to Southern Paiute people, you might hear us reference that word after we're talking about someone, and that means that that person has passed on. It's a word in our language that easily translates to English, meaning you're over here, I'm over here, or you're over there, I'm over here. And it's that we don't commonly say our deceased people's names because we believe that they'll hear us from the spirit world and they'll come to our call. So we don't want to bother them when they're doing their business in the spirit world. My grandmother's name is Beaded Buckskin Dress. Her English name is Nola, and her father was Nober Zuniga. I'm also mixed with Northern Ute and Shoshone Bannock, and so I have a pretty good broad perspective of the tribes in Utah. So I am the Cultural Resource Manager for the Paiute Indian Tribe of Utah. Paiute Indian Tribe of Utah is made up of 5 bands. We have the Kasharam Band, the Kanosh Band, Indian Peaks, Shivwits Band of Paiutes, and the Cedar Band of Paiutes. So our band geographic location spans starting up from central Utah, spreading clear down to southern Utah, reaching way wide over here to southeastern and southwestern Utah. So we refer to our landscape as the Yanawan. That means the Holy Land. This is the land that we believe that Creator had placed us on to take care of and to be stewards of. So slide. So, in our culture, we don't boast about ourselves. We're taught to be humble. And so when I'm presenting, to groups outside of our tribal organization, I always just give a short introduction. So I received my undergrad from Southern Utah University, majoring in anthropology, minoring in psychology, and I'm almost done with a master's degree in CRM from New Mexico Highlands University. I am the lead author and researcher for the Pipe Spring National Monument International Dark Sky application, which gained its designation in the spring of 2021. My method of research was an applied anthropological perspective. And I am a first maternal generation descendant, like I said, of the Cedar Band of Paiutes. I'm also a member of the Utah chapter of Lambda Alpha National Anthropology Honor Society. So like I said, we as Native people, we're very humble. We don't put up our accolades to people. But I like to do that to groups outside of ours because in your guys' world, our knowledge doesn't hold any teeth until we hold those degrees. And that's true. And the sad part about it is a lot of our cultural knowledge and our tribal perspectives, our elders and our medicine people have way beyond a PhD of understanding and education about Native American perspectives. But they're not given that credit until they hold that degree in your guys' world. So go ahead and change the slide. So what is Indigenous archaeology? Indigenous archaeology is a pretty new concept in the study of social science. So Indigenous archaeology is the theory that can help decolonize the fields of anthropology and archaeology to attempt to right the past wrongs. So today, we are righting those past wrongs by including Indigenous voices. Indigenous archaeology is archaeology informed by Indigenous ethics and schedules. We are the best teachers. We are the professional people that know best on how to teach you guys how to handle and interact with these sites. So there are 4 key aspects to the study of Indigenous archaeology. First, Indigenous archaeology assists the welfares of Indigenous communities. We always need to keep in mind that anything that we are doing when we are interacting with Native people's sites, landscape, history, and culture, how does it benefit the company or the community? Are you putting economic revenue back into our villages, our clans, our communities, our reservations, our homes? Are you employing Indigenous people within your businesses to help them, fulfill a better life? Second, the technique of working with these communities in partnership. We are your partner. We are not your adversary. We are not your enemy. We are not your hindrance to make your business stop working. If you work with us, it can make your businesses and your agencies function so much better because we can teach you stuff that you will never ever be able to find in a book. Third, partnership entails that many voices be heard. Inclusivity amongst tribes. We have so many tribes on the Colorado Plateau and in the Southwest, and lots of times in our areas, we get funneled to, one perspective of one tribe because maybe their population is larger than another tribal perspective. But it's important to integrate all those tribal voices. And lastly, that archaeology should be of use to Indigenous people. How is what you're doing a use to us? How is it helpful to us? Is it creating opportunities for our youth to go out and visit these sites? Is it creating opportunities for our elders to come out and visit these sites or our community members that maybe don't have access to these places? It's important to remember that not all Native people are born and raised on reservation in rural areas. That's me. I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, but when my mom and grandma left the reservation, they took their traditionalism with them, and they embedded that in me in an urban lifestyle. But growing up, I never had the opportunity to go camping, to go out on the river, because I was in the inner city, kind of like in the projects of Salt Lake. So remembering, how is this helpful to our people? How can it be of use to them? Maybe creating opportunities for young kids like I was that didn't have a chance to come out to the landscape. Slide. So assisting the welfares of Indigenous communities. Communicate with local tribal communities to help figure out needs in terms of anthropological and archaeological work. Call our tribal offices. Call people like me that are sitting in those offices. If we can't help you, we can find somebody in the community that can help you. But it's just taking that first step and connecting with us. And I realize that that can be very intimidating. It can also make you feel very uncomfortable. Maybe you have some type of project that you're really interested in working on. Like maybe you're creating like a trifold or a brochure, and you need to go and sit in front of our tribal councils to get that stamp of approval to publish that information. That can be intimidating. But just remember, they're just normal, regular people, just like you. We're not any different, so don't get intimidated. And don't assume as an educated social scientist you know best. You don't know best. You don't know what is best for interpretation of our ancestors' sites. You don't know what is best on how to interact with them. Get comfortable with the uncomfortable. That's something that I always say. Some of the things that we say to you guys, or some of the actions that we do in our ancestral sites or on our landscape, is going to make you feel weird. It's going to make you feel like you don't belong. Should I interact? Should I not? Should I leave when they're doing this? Or maybe you're an atheist and you don't believe in a higher power, and so it really makes you feel uncomfortable. But getting okay with that feeling is what's going to pull us all over this hump. Because just as much as you guys are uncomfortable in our presence, some of our tribal people are uncomfortable in your presence when they're speaking and when they're talking and when they're doing their spiritual rites. So you have to remember that. What you may think is a need could not be a need for the community. And I would say that this is where building that bridge of communication is important. Especially like with the Paiute Indian tribe of Utah. If you call me with an idea, like I said, I'm a very straightforward person. I'll tell you straight up. I'm like, you know what? That doesn't sound like something we're interested in. I'll use an example. I had a gentleman contact me with a type of festival that he was going to hold out on one of our ancestral landscapes. And it was all based on women and holistic views and how it can get them to re-energize and reconnect with the landscape, which is wonderful. But he wanted a Southern Paiute woman to go out there and to drum and to sing and basically to cultural appropriate our own culture to satisfy the needs of the Euro-American descendants. And so I had told him directly, I said, I'm sorry, this is just not something that we should be involved in. Don't get offended by that, you know. Sometimes it's just not needed for our tribal communities, or it's not needed for that interaction. Slide, please. So the technique of working with Indigenous communities in partnership. Open communication is the biggest one. Listening rather than always speaking. This is a cultural value of the Nuang people. When I was being raised by my grandma, something that she had always told me before she started to teach me something is she would say, you be quiet, you sit down and you just watch my hands, and you watch how my hands move, and you watch how my body moves. You don't ask questions, you just listen. And as a kid, that was really hard, and I didn't understand why sometimes she would tell me not to speak when she was doing stuff. Now, as a 40-year-old woman, I understand. It was because she was teaching me that spiritual connection. She was teaching me that sometimes words aren't needed, that your ears, your listening, your nakos is what is more important, that you're not going to learn unless you listen. Learning and respecting the group's communication method. This is where your ethnography skills come in. Every tribe has a different form of communication. For us, when you're communicating with Southern Paiute people, we are a matriarchal society. Women have the voice in my nation. We're very strong, we're very forward-speaking, but we like to joke and tease a lot as well. So when you're around Southern Paiutes, you're going to see a lot of the women getting up and talking, where our men will wait until we finish. With other tribes, like the Hopi, they're patriarchal. You're going to see more men. No? Okay, she's more matriarchal.
More matriarchal.
Yeah. Other tribes, no, they are more patriarchal. So, understanding that in some settings you may be considered the unwelcomed outsider. This stems from historical and genocidal trauma from colonization. Sometimes when you government agents come in your uniform, it is not welcomed in our tribal facilities. Our tribal people do not want to see you come in there all fastened up and buttoned up in your Class A's. It is not a Class A in a tribal building. So maybe think about how you're approaching the tribal people. Come in your civvies, come in your regular clothes. For Southern Paiutes, we're very informal people. Like I said, we're really relaxed, we like to joke a lot. You don't have to feel like you need to come in all nice, tight, and buttoned up. Just come as you are. And when you're going to talk with tribal elders, especially if you're collecting ethnographic information, you need to bring them something. You do not just approach our people and start taking information. If you're going to sit down with a tribal elder, you should bring them some tobacco. If tobacco isn't your thing, bake a loaf of bread, bake some cookies, bring a fruit basket, bring something like that. But you're giving a gift because you're exchanging information. That elder is giving you a gift of knowledge. And that's a very sacred thing. Because for Southern Paiute people, nowadays, a lot of our elders are very reserved. They do not publicly outshare information. And it is because of what has happened in the past. They have that genocidal trauma. They have that mindset of cultural appropriation is going to happen again. And people are going to take from the Nuang people like they have so much. So you really need to build that relationship. I would say that you also need to consider the context of the information that you're taking. Recently now, a lot of people are learning more about boarding schools. And they're super excited, and they want to be an ally, and they want to help, and they want to record this information. But when you're speaking to our tribal elders about instances like boarding school, you're making them relive that psychological, emotional, and physical trauma that was embedded on them as children. And so my best method that I always say is that you should have a backup plan for a clinical psychologist or counselor there. Because if you are bringing someone down to their knees to relive that emotion, it can create emotional and behavioral instances that are severe for them. It could cause somebody to fall off the wagon and start drinking really bad. It could push somebody to drug abuse. It could push abuse or almost like suicide. So being conscious of what you're talking about and how it affects us, because our genocidal trauma is embedded in our DNA. It has been scientifically proven through social science that Indigenous people, we have carried that by generation to generation. And a lot of people wonder, okay, well, why are Native communities so dysfunctional? Why are there high rates of alcoholism and drug abuse? That's why. Because we are constantly living in this fight or flight mode, and it is embedded in us. And so a lot of us younger people are trying to be cycle breakers. We're trying to break out of that. And we will get very defensive and protective of our elders when people try to come in and take that information from them. Understanding that in some settings you may be considered, oh, I already read that one, sorry. Push colonial methods out the window. Do not come into our tribal communities with colonistic mindsets. You probably underlying have these tendencies and don't even know that you're exhibiting them. So I would say educating yourself on what is white fragility. What does that mean? What does it mean to have colonial mindsets? What does it mean interacting with our different genders or our non-binary people? Educate yourself when you're going to come into our communities. A lot of times, yeah, we come out and we speak and we educate you guys, but it really is not our job to educate you on how to be a good person. It just isn't. And hire tribal workers. That is something that I spread throughout the region to the Park Service, to the BLM, to agencies, to outfitters. Hire tribal people. You want a bigger tribal perspective? Hire one of us. Let us be there and talk for ourselves. Slide. Partnership entails that many voices be heard. After consultation and approval from cultural departments and councils, seek other members of the group. Lots of tribes are going to need you guys to get approval for what you are publicly sharing. That again means going to the tribal council, consulting with people in my offices, CRM people, tribal TIPOs, cultural committees. Lots of tribes have cultural committees that they use. Once you get that stamp of approval, then you can move forward. I really press that because lots of times people will not get our permission and they'll go and publish something or they'll start giving some type of interpretation. Legally, tribes can sue you for that. That is our traditional ecological knowledge, and there are certain federal laws that protect that, and you don't want that to happen to you or your agency. Do not silo your research to only certain recommended persons. This is something that I see commonly happens within tribal nations and bands. You find this one person that's really knowledgeable and you keep utilizing that person and then any person that they recommend. And you don't go farther out into the community to seek other people. For Nuang people, when we have leaders or individuals in our community that hold certain types of knowledge, we call them miavs. That means you're a boss, you're a leader. So something that I was passed down to me was I have star knowledge. A lot of our people in our nation don't. And so I would say that my miav is holding star knowledge. But maybe you don't want information about astronomy. Maybe you want information about geology and minerals. There could be somebody else in my tribe that has more information than me. So don't just always utilize the same people. Do recognize how Christianized religions can affect traditional knowledge. It can create a dismissive mindset of TEK from tribal perspectives. TEK is traditional ecological knowledge. That is that acronym. Organized religion is a hard one. It creates a conundrum for Indigenous people, particularly for my tribe. Lots of our tribal members interact with organized religion, and that's completely fine. We're taught as traditional people to not judge. The Creator or Sonoiv has placed all of us here to lead our own life path. And so it is not my obligation to tell one of my tribal people that they should not be involving themselves in organized religion and living in traditionalism. That will be Creator's job, not mine. But sometimes for people like me, how I was raised, I do not recognize organized religion. So a lot in our area with the church, with the Mormon church, we get the idea that Native people are descendants of the lost tribe of Israel. They're referred to us as Lamanites. And lots of times on sites, You'll see panels and you'll see people talking like, this is proof. This is proof that they're from the lost tribe of Israel that migrated all the way over here. That's offensive to me, you know, because what my grandma taught me is that I crawled out of that Grand Canyon. You know, my ancestors did. They came across this Colorado Plateau to settle it here. So it creates a dismissiveness in our traditional teachings. Try to be community engaged in informal settings. We don't always have to come and be presenters for you in a professional atmosphere. Come to our powwows. Come to our community gatherings if they're open to the public. Lots of times for the Paiute Indian Tribe of Utah, on our Facebook page, we'll post flyers about what we're doing, and the community can come. It helps you guys understand who we are if you come to see us in informal settings. Slide, please. Archaeology should be of use to Indigenous peoples. Will your work help the tribe? Will it be useful for future generations? As Native people, we're always preparing for the 7 generations ahead of us. We're preparing for those babies that haven't been born yet. And so anything that I do today, I need to solidify that information or any interaction that I have is going to be something beneficial to my future tribal people. Share your research with Indigenous groups. If there's information not requested to be shared, honor that request. And that's a bottom line. If we tell you no, it means no. You don't need to question multiple ways of how to get a yes. When we're saying no, it means no. If you write a dissertation, if you write a publication, if you write a book, if you write all of these things and you get your permission, give us a copy back so we can store it in our tribal archives so that future generations can read and see that information. This is your research, but it's our history. You know, you might enjoy researching us and reading about us and writing about us, but it is not yours. We are living, breathing people. We are not a fanatical aspect of this world that people need to research. Include oral traditional teachings into research. I think this is one that's really important that you need to make sure you're getting the right permissions for, but also, you know, nowadays, especially with the Southern Paiute people, we experienced a huge loss of culture in about the turn of the century. And, you know, like I was saying about the stories, is that one good thing about this published information is it did leave little breadcrumbs of pieces of our culture that may have been lost. And so it was through those oral traditions that some of that information was preserved. Indigenous archaeology can empower Indigenous people as they work toward decolonization of society in general and of archaeology in particular. You know, that was one reason that I stepped into the field of social science. I was going to be a clinical psychologist, and I started working for the National Park Service as an intern. And through my internship, I transitioned into a seasonal, and then I ultimately became a permanent vet. And one thing that I noticed was that, you know, archaeology from an Indigenous perspective was highly lacking within federal agencies, and I wanted to help fix that. And I wanted to empower other people like me. I wanted to empower younger people to feel comfortable and confident about stepping into these spaces. Because a lot of our younger people, it's really hard for them to come into these spaces because, you know, when we were young and teenagers, everybody wants to be cool. They all want to fit in with each other. They all want to be accepted. But we as Native people are continually walking in two worlds. And my grandma the other day at our Women's Day event said it best. She said, we're walking in our moccasin on one foot and a tennis shoe on other, and we have to marry those two viewpoints. And that can be extremely hard. And that, if it is not brought together equally, can create issues of cultural identity loss. And that in turn can upset our spirit and our understanding of the world through traditional eyes. So I figured, you know, why not empower Indigenous people to be archaeologists? Slide. Archaeology in the Southern Paiute. The false claim of the Southern Paiutes arriving to the area late and pushing out the ancestral Puebloan groups. Lots of people, lots of archaeologists in this area, in their early dissertations and publications, had made a claim that the Southern Paiute people migrated here from the Great Basin and we pushed the ancestral Puebloan people out. That is not correct. That is a colonistic mindset of interpretation of early history of the Colorado Plateau. Because if you can remove a people's connection to the area, then you can feel more comfortable about desecrating their ancestral sites because there's nobody longer living to protect them. So, one of the proofs is that the Southern Paiute gardening can be connected to cultural belief that we descend from ancestral Puebloan people. We did traditionally garden in these areas. We gardened a Three Sisters style garden, so corn, beans, and squash. We gardened along all of these riverways and tributaries in this area. We utilized the springs for garden areas. Language is one indication of descent of Puebloan tribes. We have a dialect connection to the Hopi people. We are a Uto-Aztecan speaking people, specifically Southern Numic. We share that dialect with the Pueblo people. Gardening, like I said, has been happening in areas like Pipe Spring. It's just right over here, 30 minutes away from Kanab, for over 1,000 years. Humans have been using that water resource for over 10,000 years. Pottery is another indication of connection to the Virgin Anasazi, as they're referred to in our area. Oyas, seed pots, pottery made from basketry, seed trades, migratory trade routes. These are all proof that we do have that connection to the Puebloan sites that are in this area. This photo here is of two Kaibab Paiute women. It was taken by John Hillers in the 1871 expedition. A lot of people utilize John Hiller's photos when they're interpreting Southern Paiute people. They are not all Southern Paiute people. These are Kaibab Paiute people that they photographed. And if you look really closely at the photographs that John Hillers took for John Wesley Powell, you can see that they actually have clothes on them that are not traditional. They took a lot of Ute clothing from when they were on their expedition in Green River, and they put it on the Kaibab Paiute people. So they have like utilitarian belts around here and kind of like this weird draping canvas over them. But remember to do your research. Recognize which Southern Paiute band you're talking about, because there's 9 of us in the area. Slide. Indication of Southern Paiute archaeological sites and related to ethnobotanical practices. This is some traditional corn that I grew. Corn is very important to us. We refer to it as kumai. We have traditional oral stories teaching us about how corn was given to us. And it is a cultural value to be knowledgeable of plants as a Southern Paiute person. Plant knowledge within our community is very, very important. So when you're visiting a lot of these ancestral sites, when we're out there, we're looking at what type of plants are interacting with that site. That helps us have indication that our ancestors were interacting there. Southern Paiute people believe that all plants have a spirit and that it is up to us to continue to use the plants in a traditional manner or they will cease to exist. This was taught to me by one of my mentors and tribal elders, Mr. Ben Pickavett. When he, one day came into the visitor center when I was an intern, and he said, "Get your backpack, we're gonna be gone all day." And he just took me out on the res and we walked all day long, and he just started pointing out plants. I didn't really understand why he was doing that at first, and then finally, after a couple weeks had passed, he had mentioned to me, "I want you to know this information, because if you don't know it and we don't keep passing it, then Sonoy will take these plants away." There's a little type of barrel cactus that grows out on our landscape where we live. Nobody remembers how to use it. And he had showed me the location where they were growing abundantly. And he said, "Nobody remembers how to use this plant anymore." And we would go back each season and each year to check on it. The last time I checked on it, there was only one. And it's because culturally we believe that because we forgot about it, Creator took it away from us. So it's very important for us to understand plant life. Living areas and planting areas generally reside in areas of high native plant use. Examples can be seen in the Grand Canyon. You have an abundance of different type of native plants and different ecosystems within the Grand Canyon that were used seasonally. We would follow elevation routes depending on the season. That would help us know which plant was plentiful at which time. Traditional living structures are made from natural material and can be hard to determine a living site. Indication of native plant use can be a determining factor. Our cons, or our traditional homes, a lot of people refer to them like wickiups, but wickiup is actually an Apache word. They were constructed traditionally to deteriorate back to Mother Earth. And so archaeologists have a hard time pinning down where Southern Paiute people ancestrally lived, because there's no indication of pole holes, there's no like solid rock, and that's because we built it like that purposely, so that there was no imprint, so that Mother Earth could take back what she needed. If you do find traditional living structures, one thing that was common when we were moving throughout the seasons in the area is the person that would leave would hang sage at the doorway. And so our structures always faced east towards the rising sun, because we believe to get up before the sun rises, or you're going to be a lazy person. And one of our elders, she said, you know, for women particularly, if you don't get up before then, you're going to get shot in the patu by the sun, which means like you're going to get shot in the ass. You're going to be lazy. So get up, don't be a lazy ass. But yeah, you might find like sage hanging, and depending on how dry it is a determination of how long that person had left that living structure. Slide. So Southern Paiute and the connection to clay. The Paleo-Indian period, 10,000 to 5,000 years BC, marks the earliest recognized human occupation in general region of Pipe Spring National Monument. Pipe Spring in our area was a very active water resource before Windsor Castle was built on top of that water. You know, when you look at aerial maps of the area, you can see old dried up water tributaries that led down to the Grand Canyon. So that is proof, you know, that we were there living, also in areas throughout the monument here. There are lots of places, particularly up on the Kaiparowits, where people ancestrally lived. The Southern Paiute bands that occupied the monument area no longer exist, and the elders that did survive were integrated with the Kaibab band of Paiutes and also with some of the other northern bands. The thing that happened with them is they experienced a smallpox epidemic that was introduced to them, and it wiped them out. Virgin Anasazi were simply an offshoot of the Kayenta Anasazi. Lots of archaeologists like to make a determination that these are two separate groups, they have no interaction. That is not correct. The Kayenta are just an offshoot of the original occupiers, which are commonly known as the Virgin Anasazi. Lots of areas connected to Zion National Park, East Zion, up here by Mount Carmel, by Orderville. You have lots of indication of Virgin Anasazi people living there. Lots of pottery will be in that area. And as Georgie told you, don't take it. You're gonna get bad juju, you're gonna have nightmares. Both types of ware found at Pipe Spring. So this is interesting because when you're looking at how pottery has traveled through the area, we have indications of pottery coming all the way from Mesa Verde, traveling down through this area. And how we tell this is by the clay and the temper that is used within those materials. So a lot of people, you know, nowadays when you look at us, you're like, oh, well, you guys are just isolated occurrences on these little reservations. You know, those were boundaries that were placed around us by the United States federal government. Traditionally, we were all over this landscape. We were trading, we were moving, we were interacting with each other and the other tribes. Temper is high in quartz. Quartz is a good indication to find the geographic location of where the pottery came from. I think one of the most interesting pieces of pottery that I've seen had rose quartz in it. And so it had these nice little pink sparklies in it. It was really interesting. But that was over by the Delta, Utah area. Traditional Paiute pilgrimage paths lead to areas of high volume of quartz deposit sites. That has been proven. I don't know if there's anybody in here from All Trails or that uses All Trails. I am not a fan of the All Trails app. All Trails, I was just at a conference in San Francisco and two of the guys that work on All Trails were there. And, you know, they were saying, you know, we create this app so that so many community people, they can have this like path and understanding and build this connection to this area. And the whole time I was just sitting in there biting my tongue because I'm like, all communities, really? All communities appreciate that? Those trails that are being identified publicly, mapped publicly, are traditional pilgrimage paths for many tribes. They're historic trails for tribes. There's reasons why. Some of them are hunting trails. And when you increase visitation to those trails, lots of foot traffic, even though you think that it's not as harmful, it is. Because that dust that those boots are pushing up, they're also affecting those traditional sites. People accidentally step on pottery, so it becomes a whole thing. So just be conscious of how many people you're taking out on trails. Something that I used to do is I would create a sign-up sheet and I would limit it to maybe 20 people. Just keeping in mind how impactful am I gonna, impact this beautiful resource, because Mother Earth, she is our nurturer. She takes care of us all. And if we abuse her, she's going to stop taking care of us. And we need to recognize her in everything that we do. This is an interesting ladle. This one, I believe, is housed at Southern Utah University. But it's really interesting because when I started to do astronomy, traditional astronomy information with my elders, my grandma and my mentor that had taught me, a lot of people started to give backlash, and they started to say Southern Paiute people were traditional astronomers. And so as I was educating myself, I was digging through archival information, I found this traditional ladle. It has traditional star designs on it set within the 4 directions. There was my proof. That was all that I needed to tell people and show them, well, you know what? Yes, we were looking at the stars. We were using it in ceremonial tools. Slide. So this is a traditional landscape map of Yanawan, or the traditional territory of the Southern Paiute people. Disbursement of pottery can be seen throughout traditional territory of the Southern Paiutes, commonly referred to in our area as Virgin Anasazi, Kayentaware, Shippetsware, or Moapa Grayware. It includes portions of southeastern Nevada, southwestern Utah, along with the part of northwestern Arizona north of the Grand Canyon, which is commonly referred to as the Arizona Strip, where a lot of us go and visit and occupy. So some of these bands, as I was mentioning, that are on this map, they no longer exist at all. But this map was actually taken from the Kaibab Paiute, Southern Paiute Consortium webpage. You can Google it. There's lots of information if you want to use material like this for outreach, as long as you cite it, just like with any other resource. Slide. So Nuwabi ceramics, mainly corrugated vessels. When you are out in these ancestral areas, a really good indication that Southern Paiute people were living there is corrugated pottery. Our traditional pottery has a V shape at the end. Sometimes you'll see sticks that are along there with it. They would help hold the pot and prop them up so that when the women were cooking in them, they were like a stand. And children made toys from fired clay figurines. Sometimes you'll find little effigies. People will think they're ceremonial. It was just a kid, just making a little toy. Migration of ceramics from Moapa to the Kaibab Paiute. So the Moapa Paiutes are down in Nevada, but we have proof through doing reports and studies on the clay that the Moapa Paiutes were walking clear up here to this territory to meet with the Kaibab Paiute people, and they were bringing their clay pottery with them. Many Paiute potters were women. So like Mayan potters, some women hired men to fire close to the turn of the century. Mayans, lots of Mayan women traditionally practice pottery, so do Southern Paiute women. So I thought that that was just an interesting connection. Uto-Aztec and Southern Numic speakers connected to other Puebloan people and ceramic makers like the Mayan Natal speakers. So, Uto-Aztecan language reaches clear up from Oregon and it goes clear down to Panama. It is one of the largest language disbursements within the Western United States. And so we are related to the Mayan and to the Aztec people in that sense. Slide. Why did the art of pottery become lost? John Wesley Powell did record children in the time frame of 1868 to 1880 playing with clay figurines that were made by burning in the fire. Particularly in areas out by the Arizona Strip by Mount Trumbull, when it was an active volcano, we have songs that we still sing about watching lava come out of that volcano. There are oral teachings about our Southern Paiute women coming from these different areas, migrating to that lava, making pottery and firing it within those flows outside of the volcano. And cool fact, Mount Trumbull is one of the earliest or latest, it like stopped flowing like 600 years ago. Lots of cultural knowledge due to severe population decline. This began with Euro-American introduction. The Southern Paiute people, 1870s, well, prior to the 1870s, in the 1700s, we experienced being victims to the Spanish slave trade system, particularly picking off our women and our children. They're taking them down over the border to Mexico, selling them to the Spaniards, moving them even closer to what would be known as Los Angeles, and selling us in slave trade markets. So we get this huge population decline, because if you don't have your women, you cannot populate. And then you have the pioneers that come, and you get what is pushed on us as an indentured servitude. Brigham Young asked the Spanish to stop with the slave trade system. And so he says that what we're going to do is these children that are being taken from their homes, we're going to put them in church homes, we'll raise them as our own, and we'll educate them within the institution of the church knowledge, and then once they reach their teen years, we're going to push them back out to their community to hope to gain more converts. This backfired on him. Our people pushed these people out. They weren't accepted back into our community. And so we also have experienced instances of starvation, particularly in this area with the amount of cattle grazing that came. There is a traditional rice grass that grows in this area. Cows ate it up. They completely overgrazed it out on the Arizona Strip in less than 10 years. You have a herd out there that reaches almost to 500,000. And they're fighting over the water, and they're completely overeating the area. And the Southern Paiute people are starving to death, literally starving. So because of that severe population decline, we start to lose knowledge. Lots of those elders that was carrying that information, they deceased, unfortunately, because of the conditions. So pottery became one of those skills that was lost. Slide. Southern Paiute rock writing sites. For Paiute people, we never refer to them as rock art sites. Our elders have been very specific about that. So in your literature, please try not to use the word art. They carry traditional knowledge of our stories. There's indication of Southern Paiute astronomical witnesses. There is panels in our area that show the constellation Pleiades. There is panels in our area that show comets coming through this area. There is one actually just right here going towards Page that was vandalized recently, Cat Stare. Somebody thought it was cool to go in there and etch on that panel and put their name, which is really sad because we recently, months before, had an intertribal visit there. And our tribal people were so happy to be there. And, they were leaving their offerings and interacting. But now I think about what happened. Somebody went there and desecrated where we were just at. That panel actually holds the constellation Pleiades, which is significant to Southern Paiute people and our journey to the spirit world after we die. Our panels also hold planting schedules. So some of them are calendars. We go on a 13-moon calendar year, and you'll see depictions of that. The moon phases are very important to us. You'll see depictions of moon phases and what certain dances were held during those moon phases or what ceremonies. So for us, the spiral that we see, what I was taught from my grandma, it is our life path. It is also an indication of the spiral galaxy, or the Mohompon. It's the Milky Way. Our ancestors already had the knowledge that we were living within a spiral galaxy. Some of our other elders, they see them as water glyphs. They're indications of where to find water. Where that line ends, where it points, is telling you which direction to migrate to find water. And these are always sacred cultural sites and should not be disturbed. When you have people out there, don't touch the panel. We have oils in our hands that can mess them up. There's also some panels you should not be touching. You are putting yourself in a position of spiritual warfare. because you do not know of the powers and the entities that are there watching those sites or what was invoked. And when you start touching it and interacting with it, you can pick up some of that medicine. Go ahead with the slide. So in ending, the bottom line, this is a quote that I like to use from Mr. Vine Deloria Jr. The bottom line about the information possessed by non-Western peoples is that the information becomes valid only when offered by a white scholar recognized by the academic establishment in effect. The color of the skin guarantees scientific objectivity. There's nothing more true than has been said that. It isn't true unless your guys' community says it. But when we say it, it's a fairy tale. It's a story. It's made up. So that is one thing that I can give with you all today, is I recognize and thank each and every one of you for coming here, taking time to learn about us and our cultures, and recognizing that we are the first voices and that you can help advocate that voice for us. So ayuk, that means thank you.